tripod is. That's very useful like that. How then go through it like she said?
Okay, so over here we've got the main station area, which was going to be long enough to accommodate almost full-length trains. At the back we were going to have 3 through platforms with a short bay, just long enough for a couple of locos or a 2-car DMU or EMU. And at the front here was going to be the narrow gauge exchange, which is going to have a couple of platforms and a couple of goods sidings. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up the narrow gauge lines. Over here, where the standard gauge sidings were coming off, we're going to have another standard gauge platform there, and then this here is going to be 2 standard gauge bay platforms, and the narrow gauge is now going to be right here, its own separate station. This area was originally going to be the narrow gauge depot with storage facilities, maintenance. But over here, where the fuel siding was going to be to fuel the narrow gauge depot, the point is now going to come off here to go around to the through platform there. Buffer stops are going to be here for the 2 bay platforms, and the main station building is actually going to be up here in this corner. So you're going to have a nice illuminated area there with lots of passages, and you're going to have several footbridges coming down to the platforms there. If we go around a bit further, got the main running line there. This here is going to drop down over here by about 4 inches or so, and under here we're going to have the fiddle yard just sat above where the books are now. There's just enough room to get one in there, and I'll be able to stick maybe 8 or so sidings in there, so that'll hold a decent amount of stock. The narrow gauge will come out of the narrow gauge station here, and will come up here where the line will drop to the fiddle yard. The narrow gauge will rise above it up to about here, and then it will join the circuit, which will be 4 or 5 inches above the standard gauge, all the way around the room. So you've got continuous running on both the standard gauge and the narrow gauge with a little interchange. Round here is where the standard gauge depot will be, currently occupied by stock. Partly the reason I want to redo the station, so I've got a little more space to have a bit more stock out and running. And we'll see how that goes. Okay, so this is the current state of the station. The narrow gauge platforms were lifted up and replaced with 3 more standard gauge lines. So we now have 4 through roads, a couple of 4 or 5 coach bay platforms, and still small storage line there, which allows a lot more stock in use, a lot more operation on the standard gauge side. And if we come back to the end board over here, you'll see the new narrow gauge station. A lot more manageable. Obviously I can't still fit the 7 or 8 coach trains I was originally going to have on the narrow gauge, but we've still got reasonable length bay platform there. And a loop that'll fit maybe 3, maybe 4 coaches if shunted. So I'm reasonably happy with that. Next thing to do is to start laying the platforms and then add some ballast. So that'll be the next big project that I'd make a start on.